Hi, I'm your host, Ray Dogum, and welcome to VibeCast. VibeCast is VibeBio's official podcast where we explore some of the hottest topics in drug development, investment strategies, and technology innovation. Our guest today is none other than Sandra Shpilberg, co-founder of Adnexi, a software platform that helps biopharma identify key opinion leaders who can help accelerate treatment development and launch. Previously, Sandra co-founded Seeker Health, a clinical trial patient recruitment company, which was acquired by Eversana in September of 2018. She is also the author of New Startup Mindset, 10 Mindset Shifts to Build the Company of Your Dreams. And she's also had previous roles at BioMarin, Neurotherapeutics, J&J, and Genentech. So Sandra, it's a real pleasure to have you here on the show today. Thanks for taking the time. Why don't you start off by telling the community a little bit more about yourself and just your journey into biotech?
Yeah, that sounds great, Ray. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm glad to be here. So let's see, I started my career with a college degree in accounting. And so I went to work at banks on Wall Street, like right on Wall Street, 23 Wall Street, 111 Wall Street. And, just a few years before that, I had immigrated from Uruguay to the United States. And so having a job like that was like a tremendous privilege. Everybody was like, oh, wow, you're so lucky to have a job that is so stable and pays you well and gives you benefits. And yet I knew for myself that that wasn't my path, that wasn't the path that I was supposed to be on, that I wanted to work. At that point, the best way I could say it is I wanted to work on a product of high utility. And the way that I would define it is that whatever I was working on, the person that was going to be using it on the other side would really need it or appreciate it, right? That it would be meaningful to them. And so after doing that for a couple of years, I decided to go get an MBA to basically switch two things. One, my function from accounting to ideally marketing or general management or entrepreneurship. And then two, my industry from banking to healthcare, ideally. And so during my summer of my MBA program, I had the great opportunity of doing an internship at Genentech, the mother of all biotech companies. And I had an opportunity to intern in commercial operations. And that internship really confirmed for me that one, there were companies that were developing products of high utility. And then two, I can be involved in those from a business perspective and definitely be able to drive some impact, some success, some value to the company as well as to the patients that this product was reaching. And so after my internship at Genentech, once I finished my MBA, I went on to work at Johnson & Johnson and then decided to move to California. And I took a job with BioMarin Pharmaceutical, which back then was quite a small company. The stock value was at $4 a share. And I was probably employee number 250. At BioMarin, I didn't know when I joined that I was going to be there for 9 years. I didn't know that I was going to get this amazing opportunity to launch two products into rare diseases and then advance a third from phase 2 to phase 3. I didn't know that the stock was going to go from $4 to $120 a share in that period of time. So it was an incredible experience. And I learned a lot about launching products, but most importantly about the relationships that a company needs to have in order to do that. The massive collaboration that is necessary in order to bring a new product to market and then have a successful launch. So after 9 years of BioMarin, I decided to go even more entrepreneurial, and I went to a small company, Nora Therapeutics. And Nora Therapeutics was also developing a drug for a rare disease. But unfortunately, their drug did not succeed. Efficacy wasn't there. And so I was out of a job. But in that particular role, I had this very important opportunity to try out some digital ways of finding patients for that clinical trial. And even though the company Nora Therapeutics was going to disband, I was walking away with an idea for a business. And so immediately after I got my severance package, I turned around to start my first company, Seeker Health. And Seeker Health was all about finding patients for clinical trials using digital media, online processes, and services. And so I ran that company for 3 years. We grew very rapidly, and then we got acquired by Eversana. I continued on for another year and a half with Eversana, growing the business. We ended up enrolling 60 different clinical trials, mostly in rare disease and oncology. So a very big impact for a small company. And then after I sold Seeker, I was basically going to take a little bit of a break, but the stars didn't quite align for that to happen. And so instead, I decided to start Adnexi. And today I am co-founder and CEO of Adnexi, a platform where we find key opinion leaders, digital opinion leaders, influential healthcare providers, and help companies profile and map them as comprehensively as possible in order to enable these relationships that accelerate product development and launch.
So I think you shared with me a little bit about the kind of origins of Adnexi, but can you go into detail about why and how you started it?
Yeah, I'd love to. So year 2020, it's COVID, and I am at home with my family. And our son, who had been programming for a very long time by then, he was 16 years old by then, but had started programming at 12. He came to me and he asked me, if you had to start another company in the biopharma space that used technology, what would it be? So he asked me that question. And that's what set me into this area of, well, with Seeker, we're with finding patients. Now, with this one, we can help companies find the key external experts that they need for their various activities. And so he loved the idea. He was looking for something more challenging to program. He had already programmed some interesting things, but he was looking for something a little bit more challenging. And this was, of course, very challenging, right? Like now we're going to be talking about APIs, multiple APIs, integrating, aggregating data, matching names, matching MPI numbers, all sorts of things that go into this platform. And and that's when we decided in April of 2020 to be co-founders for our company. So I am in a very rare and unique situation in which we are a mother-son co-founding team. He is the CTO and manages all software engineering for Adnexi, and I am the CEO, and I manage all the business aspects, so project management or the client acquisition and client delivery, as well as the administration. And it's been a really great partnership. And I'm really excited that I get to do the second business with my son. And it was really his question that prompted the company.
Wow, that's such a beautiful story. I can't imagine that. I mean, there's not many mother-son sort of co-founders, so that's really incredible. How is it on a day-to-day basis working with your son? Do you interact, for hours a day, or is it just like sometimes?
No, we interact for hours a day.
Yeah.
And, throughout the time of the company, sometimes we've been in the same location, which we prefer. And in those cases, we go to the same office. We generally walk together to the same office and go through our meetings. And I will have, let's say, more of a business development meeting. He'll listen in and he'll get a lot of information by listening in. And similarly, he'll be working on his platform development plan, and I'll jump in to take a look at what he's doing. So, and then at some points we have been not in the same place. And when we're not in the same place, we check in every single day about, basically it's like, what are you working on today? And also check in with other members of the team that are part of the team right now. But one of the things that is really funny for us is that we sometimes get on the phone and we're not really sure exactly what's happening, but then we check back and we've been on the phone for 2 hours. And I'm like, oh my God, this could be a long form podcast if we recorded this conversation. But yes, we'll start talking about a customer, we'll start talking about strategy, or we'll start talking about the future, or we'll start talking about our team. And then before we know it, I look down and we've been on the phone for 2 hours.
I really appreciate all that context and background, Sandra. And, one thing that I picked up from that is this recruitment effort for rare disease is really hard. I know that it's hard to find patients out there. So using digital technologies and social media is like the next step forward for a lot of these companies. And, you sold that in 2018. A lot of things have changed since then, even just like, 5, 6, 7 years ago. So it's really great that you've had all of these experience to put into Adnexi now. So tell me more about Adnexi, and maybe I could see how you were motivated to start it. But again, for the people that might not be aware of why it's so important to find the right KOLs, what is like the problem you're trying to solve?
Yes. So, the saying that goes, it takes a village to raise a child. So when it comes to treatment development, it actually takes a planet, right? That's the way I like to say it. And so the company that is developing a new drug is going to need key external experts across functions, across geographies, not just the US. They're going to need to go into Europe and India and Brazil and China and other major population centers. And it's across media. Some things are going to be done the old-fashioned way with in-person meetings, and some things are going to be done online. And so basically the main component of developing a drug is collaboration. That's what it is. And a company cannot do it alone. They can't, a person cannot do it alone. A company cannot do it alone. And a country cannot do it alone. It takes this massive, massive collaboration. And so with Adnexi, what we're doing is we're helping to process as much data as we can find, and some of the data we generate ourselves, in order to find who a company can collaborate with in order to accelerate drug development and launch, right? So we're talking about finding external collaborators, and these have different flavors, right? In our industry, some of them are called key opinion leaders, which are very scientific in nature. Some are called digital opinion leaders. Some are called influential healthcare providers. We call some of them rising stars, but we have all these different terminology to refer to different types of researchers, scientists, doctors, patient advocacy groups, patient ambassadors, patient leaders who are somehow could benefit the process of drug development, right? And in turn, then benefit the patients that eventually are going to receive this treatment. So that's basically the setup for Adnexi, right? There's this massive need for collaboration. There's massive data to process to figure out who might be a good collaborator. And what we're doing at Adnexi is we set up a platform where we aggregate all of this massive data, and then we create our own data as well. We go out and search for new information that we can create so that we can advise companies on who might be the best bets. And what happens at companies is that there are two different things that are going on basically at the same time. One is a company is going to start their work and they're going to know who the top 5, 10 people are in the field, right? I'm talking about the top 5 or 10 researchers in a rare disease that have done the foundational work to set up for drug development. They're going to know those people. The reality is that as the product goes through the life cycle, 5 to 10 people is not going to be enough. You're going to need 100, then 200, then 400 of these different experts involved in all of the different activities that encompass product development. So that's one thing that's going on. And at the same time, there's a lot of data to process on them. And so we can use that data to make informed decisions about who might be the 100 that get chosen or the 200 that get chosen to engage in these relationships.
That's really interesting. And, I think most people are familiar with KOLs, key opinion leaders, as a term, but maybe less familiar with the digital opinion leaders or influential opinion leaders. And, it's so important to have these KOLs to endorse, maybe even kind of talk about the product to their networks. So I can imagine what a DOL is, but can you kind of describe it in a little bit more detail? Does it just mean that they're online, or what is that?
Yeah, let's actually go through all
Sure.
of them because it helps to see the difference. So a key opinion leader is generally a scientific expert in the condition. So by scientific expert, I mean someone who has engaged in a great deal of scientific activity. That is generally peer-reviewed papers that would appear on PubMed, that were published on The Lancet or the New England Journal of Medicine about that specific condition. They have participated in clinical trials, perhaps for other conditions or this condition. They've gotten NIH grants and they've gotten paid by Biopharma to consult or advise or speak on behalf of that. So that's generally the profile of a key opinion leader. They're scientific in nature. And I also want to add, they might be speaking at congresses like the American Society of Clinical Oncology, those types of high-level congresses where they go and they speak about the disease or about a product. That is the traditional key opinion leader. And within that, there's different flavors. There's the ones that are very established and have been doing what they've been doing for 40 or 50 years, which is good, but you have to be careful because some of those might retire by the time the product launches. And so you want to have the next set, the next generation ready. And we usually call those rising stars. So those are the key opinion leaders that are scientific. Then aside from that, and sometimes overlapping with that group, are the digital opinion leaders. And these are also experts on the disease, but they rely on digital media to educate and discuss the disease. So instead of writing a peer-reviewed publication that's going to be 20 pages and it's going to have statistical analysis and it's going to end up on PubMed, they're going to turn on their camera and post a video on YouTube about a specific procedure, a specific disease that is relevant, to this particular biopharma company. Sometimes about a specific treatment, right? That is exactly what the biopharma company is working on. So these are digital opinion leaders. They are growing at the moment because obviously these media are very important. And what we can do at Adnexi is we can find them. We can profile them. We can make sure we understand what it is that they're posting about today. And then we can engage them. We can bring them into the fold to introduce them to the company to potentially be educated about the opportunities that are available at the company, whether it is to share content or create some kind of educational opportunity for patients or for doctors. And then the third category, which might overlap with both of those, is what we call influential healthcare providers. And an influential healthcare provider may be somebody who, let's say, is down the road, they're treating 1,000 patients a year of this like rare disease. So they're a center of excellence, but for some reason, they're not paying that much attention to publishing. Maybe they published 1 paper, 2 papers, but they didn't publish 56 papers like the top KOL. Maybe they participated in 1 trial, but they didn't do 10 trials. And so they might not rise up when we're looking at the data aggregation, but their peers are telling us that they're the influencer, that if they have a patient with this disease, they send them there, that if they had their own child with that disease, they would want him to be seen by that specific person. So those are influencers. And for that type of data, we generally rely on our own data generation to generate that information directly from their peers.
Very interesting. Now I'm trying to think of how a biopharma team goes about finding these traditionally before Adnexi or before these tools, let's say. What is sort of like the process these biopharma teams go through to find the right people? And, do they already have a database in-house typically? Like, can you describe what you're seeing there?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of like a small biotech company that is starting out, what they're going to do is early on, they're going to go on PubMed. They're going to look at who are the people that seem to have published significant bodies of work on the disease. They might go on clinicaltrials.gov and do a similar search. And most of it is going to be pretty manual and it's going to be outdated. And, the most important thing is we're working on a dynamic market where things are changing every day. New publications are coming every day, new clinical trials, new payments issued to these physicians. And so we want to make sure that we have the up-to-date information. So yeah, in the past, it was mostly done manually, collecting handfuls of key opinion leaders at a time, then probably engaging them first in a clinical trial. So the clinical trial principal investigators will become sort of the closest relationships that the company has. And usually, for a company doing a rare disease, that might be 20 key opinion leaders at 20 different clinical trial sites. And then as the commercial effort begins, then it's going to be like, okay, well, 20 isn't going to be enough to reach all the patients that are out there. So we're going to need to expand to well beyond that. So it was done manually, Excel spreadsheets, right? but no longer.
Yeah.
Now the technology exists to aggregate the data that will lead us to not the top 20, but the top, 200, the top 500 of these key opinion leaders.
Yeah, and it would be great for these teams to get that access, I think. And primarily these teams are composed of like clinical ops people, clinical operations, medical affairs people, and market access or marketing sorts of teams, right, at these companies.
That's right. So key opinion leaders are key external experts are used throughout the product development and commercial life cycle. So you mentioned the three different touch points in which we would come in. So the first is product development. The product is in clinical trials, phase 2, phase 3, and there we're going to come in to help companies figure out where they can place the clinical trial, who are the clinical trial sites. We can help at that point begin to expand publication groups that they might be putting together or guidelines groups that they might be trying to foment some kind of action into. Then after that, we move on to the pre-launch phase, which is the drug has been submitted for approval by the FDA and is now being reviewed. And in this pre-launch period, the commercial team is very busy, right? They need to sort of prepare all of the different activities and strategies that are going to hopefully lead to an amazing launch where every patient that has this disease finds out about this drug, either through their doctor or through other means. And so that's a pre-launch period. So in that time, we help medical affairs with providing the right medical education, finding who to provide the right medical education to, and we help the marketing departments. And then at launch, once the product is launching, then there's a very definite expansion of what the needs are. And generally, then we work with marketing teams or we work with digital teams sometimes or market research to help them find additional experts to engage in their many activities. So when you're thinking about the launch, it now becomes a very large strategic and tactical plan that includes speakers, bureaus, and publication plans and advisory boards. And all of those have opportunities where these key external experts can be involved.
Yeah, I think some people might not appreciate all the communications, planning, and conversations that need to go into a drug development program. And oftentimes, a lot of that work goes into a program, and then you see in phase 3, it might not even get approved. So this is something that usually goes on behind the scenes. And I'm sure that tools like Adnexi provide sort of like that streamlined experience for people in the biopharma space. So one thing that I guess concerns me, let's say, is in social media, specifically many influencers online, they are not qualified or don't have the education to talk about some of the things that they're making claims about, specifically, any kind of treatments, medical practices. So what are some of the pros and cons with using these influencers?
Yeah, this is a great question. So the pros of using a digital opinion leader or social media influencer is that the content that they're posting, first of all, is free, right? 2, it's available to anybody and it's available at any time. So we don't have to schedule the patient into a patient, meeting, a patient education meeting. We don't have to schedule the doctor into a webinar. It's available online anytime they want, anytime they search, or anytime you link them to it. So those are generally the pros. The cons are exactly what you mentioned, that the expertise and the accuracy, the expertise of the person and the accuracy of the content has to be questioned, right? It has to be questioned. So if you're consuming social media, what I would say is, make sure that we understand who is the speaker. So for example, is this person a doctor that is speaking that treats patients with this condition? Or is this person not that, right? And is what they are sharing, is the content that they're sharing an opinion or scientifically based information, right? I think that those are really important questions that a consumer of the information can have. Now, what we're doing at Adnexi is we're helping companies sort through this, right? So when we search for digital opinion leaders, we're going to discard the ones that we think are not providing accurate information and also are not qualified to provide accurate information. And so when I define a digital opinion leader, the first word is an expert in the disease. And that means that generally they're going to get in front of the YouTube camera and they're going to say, I am an endocrinologist speaking about this condition. I am an ocular surgeon speaking about this condition. That's what we're going to be looking at from the Adnexi filter to label someone a digital opinion leader. So someone that just puts their camera on and says, I'm going to speak about thyroid eye disease, they're not a digital opinion leader for us. Digital opinion leader is somebody who's basically earned the ability to speak about this topic in a credible and accurate way. And that's what we're helping do with our platform, sort through them. And once we've identified that these are experts that are actually qualified to be speaking about the condition, then profile them and map their activities so that we can allow a biopharma company to now make a decision on who they need to engage.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, you'd have these biopharma teams kind of digging through the entire internet trying to find the right, opinion leaders. So it's helpful to have your updated list that you've already filtered through already. So that's really great. Now I want to kind of go under the hood and talk more about the operations. How does Adnexi actually work? Like what makes you unique? And I do understand you're leveraging artificial intelligence. So could you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, let's start with the AI and then go backwards from there. So we are using artificial intelligence in our platform. And at this moment, our analysis of artificial intelligence is that it is really good at reading and writing. So it can read reams of data, for example, all of the PubMed articles on a specific rare disease, and it can write about them. It can summarize them in a really good way. And so we are using the large language models to do some of that work, reading, summarizing, writing out, and then writing at different levels where the summary can be more accessible to people who may have less scientific background. Because when you think about a biopharma company, yes, everybody's scientifically minded, but the person in marketing is not going to have the same scientific background as a person who is running, clinical development or clinical affairs, right? And so we can do all of that in the platform with the large language models. The way the platform works, to go a little bit higher than that, is that we aggregate massive data. And this data comes generally from 3 different sources. The first source is scientific data. This is going to be massive data sources like PubMed, clinicaltrials.gov, and so forth. And here the trick is that we are setting up Adnexi in a way where we can get exactly the instance that the client is looking for. And this is very important in rare diseases and oncology in particular, because we are generally looking for a very specific part of the disease, and we can do that at Adnexi. We can customize the search to bring in only what the client wants to see from those scientific sources. The second source of data is digital data. And so there we go to Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn, and then we gather who is posting, what are they posting, and then we have some great technology to be able to bring in exactly what they're posting so the client can see it and then analyze it for them. And then the third area of data, and this is a huge differentiator for us, is that we create our own data. And we create our own data by doing a number of surveys of peers primarily, in which we ask direct questions to help us begin to sort and rank the people that we are getting information from. So in those surveys, we might be able to rank digital opinion leaders as well as key opinion leaders, as well as find new influencers that were known by the company. So those are the 3 different areas of information that we collect and then process into the platform. So scientific, digital, and then influence, as well as our own data.
Are there specific social media platforms that you're finding most advantageous to use? Like, and you mentioned Facebook, you mentioned LinkedIn. I feel like LinkedIn would probably be a good one because it's very professionally minded and you have a lot of maybe scientists and things there. What are you seeing in the space?
Yeah, that's a great question. We see a lot of activity on YouTube. So when it comes to healthcare providers creating content for either healthcare providers or patients, we see a lot on YouTube. We see on LinkedIn a lot more of HCP to HCP. So things that, like you said, are going to be more serious, more business-minded, more science-minded. And then, of course, we see on TikTok a lot that is addressed to patients. And so it depends on the disease that we're working on. We don't do all our work on rare disease. So for example, we've been working lately on a new innovation in major depressive disorder, and TikTok is off the charts there. There is so much content being shared, good content being shared by, PhDs in psychology, psychiatrists that are creating content about this condition. And so we see a lot on TikTok as well.
Yeah, and I know that YouTube's trying to get into YouTube Shorts, to compete with, I guess, TikTok. Are you seeing sort of, and then you have like Instagram, like it's really hard to, wrap our minds around what the next year is going to look like with social media. And it sounds like TikTok is, and for the last couple of years, has been really the hottest social media platform that we're seeing. Are you seeing any new platforms, or is this sort of like what we're working with now?
I think these are the platforms we're working with right now. I'm always looking for new platforms. And something that's really important to us is what are the demographics that we're looking to impact, right? And so for us, when we're working with our clients, they're generally trying to educate two groups of people that are very different. So one, they're trying to educate other healthcare providers, right? And those generally are going to be adults, right? They're going to be like 30 plus. So they might skew a little bit more towards the older platforms like YouTube and Facebook and so forth. But once in a while, if we're focusing also on trying to find who's educating patients, then now we need to ask, who is the patient? And many times, let's say when we're working in oncology, the patient is still of age, right? Like 40 plus. But in rare diseases, the patient sometimes is a child, and the patient is the mom, the young mom of a child who was 3 years old, who just got diagnosed with this rare disease. So what matters the most to us is who is the patient population that we're looking after, who is the population that we're trying to educate, and where are they most likely to be. And it's a little bit age-driven, gender-driven, right? As well as sometimes geographically driven.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that insight. Yeah, we're just about wrapping up here. There's a final question I wanted to ask you, actually, is one, and I don't know how much insight you have into this, but are you seeing any sort of changes in the biotech funding environment based on the conversations you've had with key opinion leaders and such?
Yeah, I am seeing some changes, and I feel like the funding environment was very challenging over the last few years, especially for small biotech companies. But I think that things are getting better, and the IPO market seems to be beginning to open up for biopharma companies. So this is really exciting, and I think it's something to look forward to. Absolutely. So Adnexi has been in business for 4 years, and initially, with Seeker, a lot of the companies that we work with were small companies. There were these biotech companies in phase 2, phase 3, maybe right after their IPO that we were trying to help enroll. So as I started this company, my mindset was that I was going to go after that same target, but it became apparent very, very early on, those were the COVID years, that was not going to be a good strategy for Adnexi, that instead I had to go to the medium and large companies that were going to be able to survive without, having to rely on external VC or IPO funding, right? That they were already public. They were already somehow managing some kind of stable operation. So for the last 4 years, instead of working with these small companies, which was always our bread and butter in my previous company at Seeker Health, we've been working with large companies, right? And it's been a really great experience. And I feel like that's been very good for Adnexi as a whole. However, in the last, I would say 2 quarters, what I have seen is more and more of the small companies that I always thought were going to be a perfect client coming to us, right? So I think things are changing. I think those smaller biotech companies are seeing a little bit of the light at the end of this dark tunnel, and they're, going to be able to access more funding. They're going to be able to maybe eventually go IPO. after a phase 2 or preparing, after a phase 3 as it was done in the past. And that's going to be super exciting.
Sandra, I really appreciate everything you shared with us today and, coming on this show, VibeCast. And I just want to, give you an opportunity to share anything else you wanted to with the community to see if you have any partnerships you're looking for or any other companies or types of companies you had in mind. And it's been a delightful conversation. So just thank you.
Awesome, Ray. You're welcome. Yeah, it was amazing to be on the show. In terms of partnerships, what we are looking for generally are biopharma companies, biotechnology companies, medical device companies who are looking to find out who are the key external experts that they need to build relationships with in order to accelerate their drug development and launch. Generally, we work with phase 2, phase 3, and then beyond. And we work with companies all across the globe. So we're a very global company in mindset and with the data that we process. And so we work not just with companies that might be based in the US, but they might be based somewhere outside of the US. And obviously, all clinical trials now are global clinical trials. And so we help with finding key opinion leaders across the globe as well, both for clinical as well as the much later commercial efforts. So with that, thank you so much, Ray. It was great to discuss all of this with you.
Awesome. That sounds great. And if anyone's listening out there and found this valuable, please do follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and leave a comment, share. And if you want to catalyze your search for KOLs, make sure you talk to Sandra at Adnexi. So thanks again.